Right. So what's up, Discovery? All right. So we're looking at the Robert Florence, and we're going to be interpreting Robert Florence, and then making some. And while we're doing that interpretation, we're also going to be making some inferences. Right. So by interpretation, I basically mean that we're going to be putting, Robert Florence's words into our own, right? But, we're not going to stray away from like what he means, but like we're going to be reading grammatically, right? And then putting into our own words, which, can either be considered like paraphrasing or translating, right? Using grammar and syntax and structures, right? And then making inferences while we're doing so. So we're making micro inferences as well as somebody making a macro inference. All right. So let's take a look here. So here we have the instructions, right? So you're supposed to read informational passage, analyze the passage by making grammatical interpretation for an accurate and detailed comprehension. You're going to paraphrase the passage to demonstrate the comprehension, and then you're going to draw inferences between sentences, as well as to draw an overall inference between what he's saying, as well as drawing an overall inference between what he is saying and and making a connection to the concept of labor and class. And then you're going to synthesize those micro inferences into a micro conclusion. You could also think of that as like a little macro inference as well, right? So micro being like the little parts, and the macro being like the overall big thing. Okay. So here you have the rubric, which again is, evidence and reasoning. Actually, I'm going to put that. I'll put a copy of that. Speaking of which, so I'm going to put a copy of that somewhere in classwork. I'll put a copy of that somewhere here in general instructions. I'm going to make sure I do that. Okay. All right, so let's go back. This is where you put the paragraph together. I'm going to mention that later on this. So let's go back to the Florence. Okay. All right, so we have the Word doc, Google Doc, where you guys are going to be writing the assignment, and then the YouTube video, right? Which is what this is, and that'll be attached. You'll see that attached here as well. Okay, so here we go. All right, so this is the assignment. I need to really quickly save as make this a little bit bigger. Yeah, we're going to save this as a model really quick. So we're not altering the original document. All right, so here we go. All right, so again, it's parts of speech stuff. This is the Common Core, yada, yada, yada. I really do miss these days where we're doing these parts of speech. There's going to be an assignment coming, which is going to go with that. I'm working on the PowerPoints for that now. All right, so here we go. It says the minimum wage exists these days to satisfy purely political goals because it doesn't have any economic basis. The real problem with workers not garnering higher incomes for much of their working lives lies in their lack of education, which is primarily a problem among the poor. The the minimum wage is not the solution. A better economic system is. All right. Okay, here we go. And then that's Robert Florence, who teaches at Syracuse University. And this is October 2016. Okay, so it says the minimum wage exists. So exist is the first verb. These days, to satisfy. To satisfy is the first verb. Purely political goals, because it doesn't have. So doesn't have is the verb there. Any economic basis. Then it says the real problem with workers not garnering. So not garnering is the verb phrase there. So you have an adverb and a verb and an action verb next to each other. Higher incomes for much of their working lives. Lies is the verb phrase there, right? Right, so think about this. So this might be confusing. Their working lives. You see working, you're like, okay, there's a verb there, no? Because it's working there is describing the type of lives, right? So lives is the noun and working is acting as an adjective to describe that noun. Lies in their lack of education, which is primarily, so is the verb there, which is primarily a problem among the poor, right? Minimum wage is the verb there. The solution, a better education system is. We're gonna, that's a strange one, right? Because again, what's the whole point of is the whole point of is that, you know, there's something afterwards that describes, you know, what comes before. Now we're going to get to the what comes before. So we have minimum wage, something exists, what exists. And again, you're always looking prior to the verb, right? Unless it's a question. You're always looking prior to the verb for the subject. So that's either going to be minimum or wage, right? And the subject is always going to be a noun, right? So in this particular case, wage is a noun. Right? And minimum is what's describing wage. So wage is the amount of money that is earned, right? So the amount of money that is earned, but it's like the minimum amount of money that you can earn from a job. Now, it says, so minimum wage exists, so, you know, it's around. So minimum wage is around these days to satisfy. Now, it says these days to satisfy. Now, it's not days, right? So this is one of those cases where it's still wage is the subject there, right? These days. So these days basically said, you know, is giving you the time period here. So to satisfy purely political goals. Right? So something political basically means that it deals with, you know, what the government wants. Okay. And then purely here is describing the political here. So purely being an adverb, political being an adjective, goals being the noun, right? So it's to satisfy goals. What kind of goals? Political goals. And how political are they? They're purely political, right? So the adverb is sort of answering the question of how political are they, right? Adverbs, in this case, when they describe adjectives, they sort of intensify the description, okay? All right. So we stop there and we're like, okay, so we see the comma, our good friend, the comma. So we see our good friend, comma, and we're going to stop for a second. Yeah, I'm going to do that. So we see our good friend, comma, and we're going to stop for a second. And we're like, okay, what is that saying, right? So it's saying that minimum wage exists these days to satisfy purely political goals. Well, there's two verbs there. It's saying that something, there's a reason why something is around, exists, right? And then it gives you some sort of indication in terms of why that thing is around. Okay, so those are two details, those two verbs, two details. Okay, here we go. And then it says because. Because, again, is a conjunction. So it's giving you put you like that, right? So cause effect. It's giving you like the reason. So it again at this point is a pronoun. It doesn't have any economic basis. So we're like, okay, the it here is the subject, but what is the it going back to? It is going back to minimum wage, right? So it here is going back to this idea of minimum wage. All right, so it doesn't have any economic basis, right? So economic being, again, like anything dealing with financial basis, and basis being like reason, right? Okay, you need to do something really quick, I'll be right back. Okay. All right. So it says the real problem with workers not garnering. So who's not garnering? Workers. Hey, how's it going? So who's not garnering? The workers. The workers are not garnering. So we're going to make that the subject. So we're going to make that the subject. And to garner is like to gain or to get. All right. So not garnering is to gain or to get. So, all right. And then it's saying that the workers are not garnering. And what are they not garnering? Higher incomes. So again, incomes being this idea of the amount of money that they're making for each of their working lives. Right? Now again, you would sit there and you would think, oh, well, lies means to lie, to not tell the truth. But here, it more so means like, like think about to like lay down or to lie down, right? So contains. Think about like that. So you see lies. Like lies in. Think about like contains or is made up of. All right. So the workers' lies lies in their lack of education. Right. So the real problem with workers not garnering higher incomes for much of their working lives lies. Okay, now this is a difficult one, right? Because you're talking about basically that this is going to be basically the doorway into like this phrase here, in their lack of education, right? Lies in their lack of education. What's being described here, right? Not honoring much incomes for much of their working lives. Like this print is like this whole thing. And this whole thing is the problem. Now, that's freaky, right? So we're gonna make you so this is one of those situations where a good amount of inferencing is needed. And we're gonna make, how are we gonna do this? Okay, I know how to do this. Boom. Because something needs to be there. Something like this. Because it's not their working lives, it's not, it's the problem. The problem is X. Because the real problem with workers not honoring incomes from much of their working lives lies. Their working lives. The problem lies in their lack of education. Okay. All right. Which is primarily a problem among the poor. Right? Again, you have a comma which is the conjunction. Conjunctions again show the relationship between the clauses, right? So it lies in the lack of education. In terms of the lack of education, they're going to give you more information about the fact that the problem lies with the lack of education, which is, right? So here, it's a conjunction, but it also sort of acts as the subject as well. But this which is going back to, it doesn't go back to workers, it goes back to the problem. Alright, so we're gonna put you, so this sucker's working overtime. So we're gonna make you blue as well. Which is primarily a problem among the poor. So what's primarily a problem among the poor? Lack of education, right? Or the problem. So it's giving you more information about that problem. All right. The minimum wage, there's no vocabulary there, right? Primarily, basically means like for the most part. Okay, so think of it like that. All right, so I think that's good enough for our vocabulary. The minimum wage. Notice that. So therefore, like, notice that for the most part, this passage is talking about this idea of minimum wage, and it's linked to what? Right, it's the microaverage here. Excuse me. The minimum wage is not the solution. Right? So the minimum wage is not the solution. So what is being described, right? Minimum wage. Right? And again, wage is what's being earned on your job, right? And it's like the minimum amount legally that can be earned, right? Is not the solution. So the minimum wage is not the solution, like the national minimum wage, the laws around the minimum wage, right? Is not the solution. Solution to what? The problem. A better education system is. So what's being described? The system. So when you say system, you're talking about like what a government is doing. Right? So you say the system, it's talking about what the government is doing. Right? And what, so you have a penal system, you have a justice system, right here you have an education system. Right? So we're going to talk about what that means when we get down here in terms of like taxation, right? So it says a better education system is, and then notice that it says the minimum wage is not the solution. A better education system is. When you see these two sentences, like, you often see this happening, this construction happening. You see two sentences and they're sort of parallel to each other, right? You have the subject here, you have a is, and then you have not the solution. You have the subject here, you have an is. What they're assuming that as a reader you're going to do, rather than having to repeat themselves, you in your mind as a reader are doing the repetition, right? That's a micro inference as well, right? So the minimum wage is not the solution. A better education system is the solution. Okay. Is the solution. Right? All right. Okay, so that gives us 23 minutes with my slight coffee break. So as always, I really miss doing parts of speech. As always, you're going to, not on this sheet, but on the other one I'm about to show you, you're going to, like usually we would break this down into two parts. So always when you're reading, you notice, what did I do? Like I read a little bit, I stopped, I put it in, I interpreted, I put it in my own words so I could try to make sure I understand it. Then I read a little bit, stopped, interpreted it myself, and then made these little connections, right, between sentences, which are micro inferences, right? And then I kept going. Each time I reach a new sentence, okay, how does that relate to the previous sentence? Okay. So, chunking it down like this is part of like analyzing a passage, okay? And this is also to help you senior year when you're like getting like Shakespeare and you're gonna have to like do, you know, what is basically called like close reading, right? To where you're reading exactly what, you know, the bard is saying, you know, without straying too far away from like details, right, of the grammar as well as the syntax. Okay, so then the micro inference going toward, I would have to say, okay, so given what the passage is saying, right, not really dealing with unions, definitely dealing with education because that's being stated, you know, directly in the passage, right? But then in terms of taxation, right, going back up here, when it talks about an education system, well, how is that better education being paid for, right? When it says political goals, right? All those politicians who have political goals, what money are they using? You know, where does that money come from? Right? So minimum wage has nothing to do with taxation because of the fact that, you know, unless you work for the government, the vast majority of people do not. You know, that's private businesses, right? But it's the government making laws dealing with private. So this money is not dealing with taxes necessarily. But this, you know, this money does in terms of education, definitely deals with taxation and how taxes are supposed to be used. It's not really corporate welfare or globalization. All right, so I would say education and taxes for the micro inference, as well as how to explain, you know, the cycles of the class system, you know, low, middle, and high. Okay. All right, so last little bit. So again, when you go in here, where it says right here, you go in there and you write in your interpretation, make sure you put your cursor, and then you start typing, right? And you write your interpretation, make sure it's in your own words, right? And you want to make sure you get all those details. So, you know, lacking detail like is where you get the 1 or 2, you know, and there are, so if there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 verbs in here, there should be 8 details in your interpretation. All right, and then your inference going towards this idea of education, right, which is stated explicitly, but then I would say the thing that gets you like 3 or the 4 would be also how it relates to like taxation as well, okay, and then as well as labor and class. All right, now, so that gives us 28 minutes. So last little minute, I wanted to basically go over here and show you that for the, so I just want to do like that. For this one that is up, where are you? All right, so that's the Gregory. Oh, here it is, the Gregory and Florence. Okay, so for this one, you want to make sure that you are taking what you wrote, right? So you're taking what you wrote here, right? And literally you're going to go back here copy and paste, and place it down here, and go back here, copy and paste, and then place it there. Okay, you're gonna do that for each of the assignments, the Gregory assignment as well as the Florence assignment. Really need to see that. Okay. And the other thing that you're going to be doing, and this is also because we are going to be doing something with this later on, right? There's always a reason why, like a future reason why I'm trying to do things the way that, and usually it's to make things easier for you. Okay, that says Sullivan and Wong, and ignore that. Okay, and then you are going to here talk about how both of those authors are saying something similar about education and its relation to labor and class. Okay. All right. And again, that statement should be at least like two similar things, and you want to make sure that you're being as complex as possible rather than as simplistic as possible. All right, and and that's the assignment that's due on Thursday. Right? So this is due on Wednesday, and that one is due on Thursday. Okay. So other than that, have a fantastic weekend. And then on Monday, you'll have a new assignment posted. All right. So as always, stay healthy, stay happy, and take care.